Welcome to the I Love Negotiating podcast, where we aim to equip you with the practical strategies, techniques, tactics, and tools to dramatically improve your negotiation results. My name is Jan Potgieter. Over the past 15 years, I've consulted to and trained many of the world's leading brands in more than 60 countries to help them improve their business negotiation results. I've trained just under 10,000 people face-to-face in a small group format, and I've negotiated on camera one-on-one with almost 4,000 people from most major cultural backgrounds. In this podcast, I want to use my experience to bring perspective to your negotiation challenges.
So hello everyone. We are coming to you today from Greensboro, North Carolina, USA. And today we're going to be talking specifically to buyers. Something very, very relevant as we talk to hundreds of buyers across the world and listening to their challenges. These two things come up the most. And if you're a seller, you also want to listen so that you understand a buyer's world. But the two largest issues that buyers have are internal negotiations and dealing with sole suppliers. So let's talk about internal negotiations. So Jan, tell me about a buyer's world as it relates to internal negotiations.
So one of the fascinating things that struck me when I started out doing negotiation skills training and consultancy was that you would always think that the toughest challenge a buyer would face would be the negotiations with the suppliers, but it turns out that most people agree the toughest ones are the negotiations they have internally in the business. So trying to convince other stakeholders, because often buyers don't own the budget, so it'll be different parts of the business that own the budget, and so the buyers get to spend the money on behalf of other people, and so those people often have a significant stake in the outcome. And suppliers or experienced salespeople are really good at trying to exclude the professional buyers from the sales process. So they're trying to sell to the end user all the time, and that has the impact where it creates relationships, and then often the buyer is seen as coming in between and spoiling things. So that's the one perspective. And then secondly, particularly in the world of direct purchasing, where buyers often buy kind of almost on a project spend basis. So they have to build a convincing proposal really to obtain the funding that they need internally from the organization to execute on these projects. So in a strange way, it's almost when they negotiating internally in the business, almost like they turn into salesmen. They almost turn into the suppliers, and they need to convince these internal stakeholders of the validity of their plans and the budget that they need to invest. And that, of course, is challenging.
So that's a lot that you just said. I tell you what, tell us two things that can help all suppliers, so all buyers, be able to take care of that issue. So
I think the first one is clear, which is familiarity breeds contempt. And I think we all know this. We all know that if you're married, if you have a partner, or if you've even just been dating, you will have run into a situation where your lack of focus on attention on detail and your lack of trying to convince somebody in the same way you would have convinced a stranger to move in your direction or to do what you want them to do has resulted in probably not getting the result that you wanted. Because we assume people understand what our interests are. We assume that people know what the key objectives are that we have, etc. And so what we do is we take the shortcuts. We don't prepare for those negotiations as well as we do for the ones that we have with suppliers. We expect them to just kind of know what's going on. We don't deploy the best practices. We don't create satisfaction for those folk. We dispense with all the things that we would normally put in place when we meet with somebody at arm's length. And that often, so my first piece of advice would be, don't take any shortcuts. Approach it the same way as you would, your external negotiations, and you'll find, that you have a much better reception. So the second thing would be, I think, for buyers to try and get the internal stakeholders involved early. The earlier you can get them involved, if you can really invest in understanding their interests, that's going to make your job easier. The later you get involved in the process, the later you need to get their support, the harder it's going to be for you to do it. So you've got to try and see how it is where you can kind of move up the value chain so that you can get involved where the demand is generated. So where the demand starts, rather than coming down the line.
So Jan, you've given us some great information. Let's summarize for our listeners the number one thing that you can do.
So in the first instance, if you want to get your internal stakeholders to support your ideas, don't take shortcuts. Approach them, prepare the same way, as diligently as you would if you were negotiating with somebody arm's length. Don't dispense with the best practices because you know them. And
then number two?
Number two is get involved early. So move up the value chain and get into, or get yourself involved around demand generation, so where it starts.
Thank you, Jan. We appreciate that very much. And to our audience, we would ask that you would go to ilovenegotiating.com. Give us your questions and we'll answer those in future podcasts.